listening to AstroDetectives, where longtime friends Scott and Sarah try to debunk
or prove
the ancient practice of astrology.
I'm Sarah Hartshorn, the astrologer.
And I'm Scott Randall, the skeptic. Each episode, I'll give Sarah two natal charts. One chart matches the exact moment of birth for our mystery guest, and the other is just a red herring.
I'll use astrology to detect which chart belongs to our guest. And with a little help from my underground network of AstroDetectives, this case is as good as solved.
Oh, we'll see about that. Welcome, everybody, to AstroDetectives. We are here. We are excited. Mercury retrograde is behind us, and we're joining you live. Not live. We're joining you on video, which is brand new. Maybe we'll look into camera from time to time. I don't know. Is that odd? We're addressing the audience on YouTube now. Instead of just having to look at a graphic of our episode, they're looking at our shining faces. These are you ever notice, like, when you see the faces of, like, people who are NPR hosts or podcast hosts, you're trying to decide, do they look different than I thought they did?
Yeah.
Doesn't that just blow your mind sometimes when you get so attached to a voice and then you see them?
Yes. Well, hopefully people kind of know, if they follow our socials, what we look like, or it's on the podcast cover. But yes,
That's
it
true.
does. I think Ira Glass and who's the host of The Daily forgot his name, Michael
Barbaro.
Yeah, those two, I was like kind of blown away by how they looked. They did not match what I thought. But well,
that's right.
Yeah.
Our faces are very prominent on every episode graphic.
Yeah.
Well, I say we're always down in the bottom corner.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, so we kind of had to, hopefully nobody noticed because we kind of pre-record these, but I did request that we took a break during Mercury retrograde. We did end up recording episode 46, and I had some feelings about that, how that went. But
hold
we
on,
also
let me see if
had
I have the sound effect. Womp, womp, womp.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to do it justice.
But we had another Mercury retrograde mishap, Scott.
No.
Yeah. So as we were preparing for this episode 47, you sent me over the charts a couple weeks ago, actually. So I've had them quite a while. So right in the middle of Mercury retrograde, you sent me these two charts. And so we have kind of like a pre-established set of standards or rules. When you're pulling these charts, I'd asked you, please make sure they have a different big three. That's like number one. And about a few months ago, I'd asked you if you could start getting Saturn in a different sign, because Saturn changes signs every year and a half. Sorry, I just blanked for a second. About a year and a half or so. And so that way, if you get Saturn in a different sign, then we'll have probably all the planets in different signs, all the visible planets, the nodes in different signs. And that's very helpful to me as I'm trying to get these charts as unique as possible without any overlap. But anyway, you had sent them to me, and the first thing I noticed is that the charts were only the dates were only 3 months apart. And I asked you about that. I was like, was that intentional? Because pretty much everything's in the same sign except for the big three. And you said, yeah, you said get Mercury in a different sign, which is so fitting for a Mercury retrograde.
Yeah. Well, Mercury isn't a different sign on these two charts, which hopefully that's helpful in some way.
A little bit, but Mercury travels very closely to the sun, so that doesn't do me a ton of good to have Mercury in a different sign. It's Saturn in a different sign will ensure that most everything will be different. So Anyway, I just thought that was funny and fitting for Mercury retrograde. And but now we are Mercury retrograde. Mercury has station direct, and we are just kind of in the post shadow. So hopefully things are kind of getting back to normal now.
Yes. The skeptical team that we have working on chart creation is taken under advisement that different Saturn placement is preferred.
Yeah.
But the one guarantee, we're guaranteeing you that the big three will be in different positions, and we're going to try to accommodate the Saturn to be in a different placement. From a technical standpoint, I expanded the dates. Instead of 1 year before and after their birthday, I'm expanding it to 2 years before and after their birthday, and then hitting random and looking at some random dates. And so, yeah, when this one came up, even though it was 3 months, I looked and I thought I was looking for Mercury. And I thought, whoa, lucky. Right off the bat, different Mercury.
Yeah.
But no, I will look for that Saturn. But again, it's not a guarantee, because, you know, the more that I have to try to make sure every planet is different gets to be too much. You know, having a different sun, different moon, different rising sign is,
And then different Saturn. That's it. That's just one more little stipulation. Yeah.
We try over here.
Yeah. Who's we, by the way?
Me and my team.
Yeah.
That should be a reminder. We are a small independent podcast production who actually can't afford to hire any teams. But if you do want to sign up for our Patreon, it's very helpful at patreon.com/AstroDetectives.
Yes, that would be great.
So speaking of these two charts that are 3 months apart, do you notice any differences? and who's going to help you out with them this week?
Yeah. Let's get to our guest first, our wonderful guest. So, I'm excited. I have another wonderful Norwalk buddy helping me out today. We have an astrologer from. She actually, very interestingly, started out as a skeptic, Scott, and now she's an evolutionary astrologer for the last 4.5 years from Ojai, California. Melissa Kelly, welcome to AstroDetectives.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so glad to have you here. So, I'm so interested in the fact that you used to be a skeptic, because that happens actually quite a bit. Someone starts out as a skeptic and then they become a professional astrologer, not just believe, or observe that astrology exists, but then they actually become an astrologer. So how did you go from being a skeptic to being an astrologer?
Yeah, so my background, I did grow up with in a very religious household. So I would say a lot of my life I was also afraid of it, so to speak. But I also would just look in the back of like Cosmo or the newspaper, and I would read the horoscopes, and I was just like, okay, you could tell anybody that they shouldn't drive a car on a Thursday. Like, that's stupid. So I just never really paid attention to it. I am a Gemini, and I do have a stellium in Gemini, but I have some very grounding elements in my chart. So when I would hear about these traits of Gemini, and Geminis are one of the ones that they like to rag on for sure, and I get it, but I just was like, I didn't relate to it at all. So I was 35, and my someone that I really, really liked said, "Can I read your chart?" And she'd been reading charts. And so I said, sure. And I didn't even know prior to that what a moon or a rising or anything else was. I was also in the middle of something very, very serious in my household happening. And I had not told anybody. And she just like read my life to me. And she didn't know a lot. Like we were friends, but she didn't know too much. And she just said all the things, and it wasn't general. It was like very specific. And so from there, like my curiosity peaked, and a couple years, and then I just started learning about my own chart. And then a couple years later, I had the privilege of studying under Deborah Silverman, who I just really love and admire. And she's so cool. She's a Gemini too, but she always says, you don't have to believe in astrology, but astrology believes in you. And I love that, because when I like look back and I see dates of people, and then, you see all these transits, it's like history is a really good way to kind of like dive into astrology, because you can't ignore history. It's already happened. You match the transits to it, and it's hard to ignore. So yeah, it's been a fun ride ever since.
So with that level of detail in somebody's chart, like when somebody was reading your chart and they were going through detail, when you imagine bringing a guest on and having two charts, are you going to be thinking, okay, if I was sitting down with this person and one of these were their chart, I should be able to probably notice that detail?
Yeah, I would hope. Yes, I would hope, definitely. And I mean, I did via the information I received with the charts, just kind of like they put some specific dates of important things that happened to them in their life, like getting married, getting a new job, things like that. Like I looked back at all the transits happening in both charts. And I think that can be a pretty significant way of seeing, which one had more activity in it. So yeah, definitely. I definitely use that. I mean, I think, we all have these like life transits, the Saturn return. I mean, there's even what do they call it? The 27 Club, where all the, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, they were all in their Saturn return when they overdosed or died. James Dean, all these people. So like there's a 27 Club. Then we have, the midlife crisis, but we all, as an astrologer, we know that's the Uranus opposition, the Neptune square, the Pluto square. Everybody goes through it, right? So, there definitely things like that, it's hard to ignore. And I would say I've read well over 300 charts at this point. And like, I haven't had anyone tell me yet that it, like when I would say, hey, what happened this month and this year, they always usually have an answer for me. Like, oh, wow, that happened. So far, so good.
Well, what are the differences you guys are going to be looking for in these two charts for this guest to identify which one is them?
Yeah. So first of all, just to remind everybody, if you want to play along and check out the charts that we are talking about here today, you can go to astrodetectivespod.com and we will have, you go to the case files and you can download those in either whole sign or Placidus, and you'll have both charts and the survey that our guest filled out. But yeah, for listeners, we have a Aries sun with a Sag moon and Cancer rising. And then we have a Leo sun with a Pisces moon and Libra rising. And for me, the main thing I'm really honing in on here is the difference in their Mars. And, in our Aries chart, we have a Leo Mars, and it is conjunct the North Node. And I happened to check the ephemeris, and this Mars stationed direct the day after they were born. So the fact that they have a fire sun, a fire moon, and such an intense Mars in a fire sign, this is a lot of fiery, active energy. And so I would expect a person with that chart to have a ton of drive, ambition, energy, courage, and there's some health things that can go along with having a very hot Mars too, redness, rash, things like that. Whereas in our other chart, we have a Mars in Libra, which is its detriment. It doesn't function as well. So all the things that Mars kind of rules are maybe not quite as strong as they would be in a fire sign. So the energy and vitality, especially with a Pisces moon, might be a little bit less than it would be in the other chart. But how about you, Melissa? What are you honing in on?
Well, like, it's funny, you guys are talking about the Mercury, but her Mercury's in Cancer in one and in Pisces in the other. And those can be kind of similar. So I was like, well, even though they're in different signs, they still, there are differences, but their communication style is going to be somewhat similar. It would be in the subtleties that you would have to really hone in on to see the difference in the Mercury. So I noticed, I really love your take on the Mars. And yeah, I personally I noticed the grand trines in the elements, and the grand trine in fire with the Aries sun and the Cancer rising chart. And kind of just what you already explained with the Mars, when you see a grand trine in fire, there's generally a lot of energy and ambition happening.
Yeah.
And then on the other chart, the Leo sun, Libra rising, she has a grand trine in water. And just based on other information that I had, even though she does have her Mars conjunct her ascendant in the first house, and that generally can be pretty athletic. But again, it's in its detriment, and it's in Libra, which is an air sign. And so, yeah, exactly to what you said, it weakens it. So the Mars conjunct ascendant might not come off in a physical your trait, so to speak, of like being necessarily, a gym rat or something like that, right? But the grand trine in water definitely also speaks to just this person maybe wanting to move a little bit slower in life. And so those are two things. I'm definitely paying attention. I'll be paying attention because I think their moon signs are different enough. A moon in Sag and a moon in Pisces are very different energies. So definitely be paying attention to that. And there's a lot of planets in the same, Saturn's in Virgo in both charts and stuff like that. So this will be kind of interesting because it's also going to be the subtleties of the houses. Like you're going to have to hone in on the houses that they're in and really pay attention to that.
And hey, one piece of trivia that I happen to notice, I looked up this Leo chart in the ephemeris as well. And this person the Leo was born on the day Uranus stationed direct.
Oh, okay.
So this
changes everything.
I think that's a key factor. And then again, remember our Aries sun, their Mars stationed direct the next day they were born. So to me, that's something I'm going to be thinking about as well.
All right. Well, we've neglected to mention at the beginning, but we're sitting at 57.3% right now. This is episode 47, so we're either going to get a little closer to 80% or a little closer to 50% with this installment of the AstroDetectives astrology test. When we return, guys, you have a chance to go to the website, download those case files, because I'm sure our astrologers are already maybe leaning one direction or the other just based on these answers that the guest has given us, and you can read their answers in the case files too. And then come on back for the interview right after this.
Hey, Astro Detective listeners, this is your resident astrologer, Sarah Hartshorn, and I wanted to let you know about my coaching practice called My Cosmic Coach, where I offer natal astrology readings, human design readings, and a whole lot more. And right now, for fans of the Astro Detectives podcast, I'm offering $25 off my signature one-on-one coaching session. This is a holistic approach I developed that will guide you through any kind of decision you're trying to make or challenge you're navigating, where we're going to consult both your human design and astrology charts and even pull a few cards too. And you'll walk away with really clear, really practical and actionable advice that is aligned and specific just to you. So head on over to mycosmiccoach.com and use promo code AstroDetectives at checkout when you book a one-on-one coaching session with me. That's mycosmiccoach.com.
Welcome back, everybody. We are joined with our guest this week, Amanda. Welcome to Astro Detectives.
Hi. Nice to finally see face for the name. I know we've been emailing for a while, so.
That's right. Some of these guests have been in the queue a while, and we go back and forth picking just the right day, or, oh, I'm busy this day, and when can you meet up? And then when we make it happen, it's a special day. So now that we're all here, we start the same place we always start. Can you kind of describe what you have on and if you have any tattoos and their significance?
Sure.
As long as they're not related to your birth sign.
Right. I don't have any tattoos. I would, except I'm a chicken, but I would probably be covered in tattoos if I weren't afraid of needles. But so I'm wearing just a blouse. It's kind of a flowy fabric, sage green and white stripe, and a pair of jeans, and black plastic frame glasses.
That sounds good. And that's interesting. That's the first time we've heard you would like to have a lot of tattoos, but it's
Yes, I would love to have a lot of tattoos.
Is there-
I'm very, like, I have in my brain, if I have all these imaginary tattoos that I would get, if I were to have a tattoo, it would be this and this and that. And I just can't bring myself to do it. I'm just too nervous. Well,
what would the first most important one be, or would they all be sort of in a certain style or realm?
they'll probably, I think, aesthetically be pretty similar. But the first one that comes to mind is there is a poem by Charles Bukowski that talks about having a bluebird in your chest. And so I imagine this sort of little window. You can kind of see the bluebird in there. So that's something I would get. I would love to have it. I would look at it every day and be happy. And I just can't do it.
Maybe you can get some of those temporary ones, all of bluebirds, and then every day you put one on.
I got some temporary ones. We were on vacation and we went to the shop that had this really cool, like, huge display of temporary tattoos. And I got a few and I put them on and I loved it. I loved it so much. And I just still, even after that, I just can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid of the permanence of it. I'm afraid that I would get tired of it. I don't mind the needles, but I don't know if I want to look at the same thing every day. But that's it for tattoo talk. But go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty decisive. Like, once I make a decision, it's made and we're just going to go with it. I don't really second guess myself, but it takes a long time to get to the decision. So maybe that's why I feel so sure about these, is because I haven't gotten them. So all I've been able to do is, like, think about it and decide. The permanency doesn't bother me so much. It's just pain averse, very pain averse.
So now I'm wondering why nobody has started the business. Maybe they have, of tattoo shops where they put you under and then you just wake up and you have a tattoo.
I think Post Malone does that. I think that's how he's been able to get so many tattoos at once. This may be an urban legend, but I heard that he does that. And then he has several tattoo artists working at the same time. He's been able to get so many.
That could be trouble.
Right.
There is cream that actually numbs you out now in your tattoos. I just did it. I have an extensive back piece that I did all in one sitting. And it was because about 2 hours in, she slathered me in this cream and I felt nothing afterwards. So there is that option. Just a thought.
Maybe another one that I've thought about getting is really small. So maybe I could start with that one, but it's an empty set. I don't know if anyone knows what an empty set is, but if you think about when you learn, math, you have a set of numbers and they put them in these little brackets, right? You have 2, 6, 8, little brackets. So an empty set is those brackets with nothing in between. There's just a space in between. And so what it represents is literally anything that doesn't exist. So it represents green puppies. It represents, trees that grow out of, chocolate pudding. Like, anything that you can think of that doesn't exist is within the bounds of that empty set. So that could be very small. Maybe start there, but maybe you can talk me into it with the numbing cream. I've heard that exists, but I didn't know how effective it was.
It is very effective.
Well, there you go. Moving on to work. Is there any sort of kind of career that you've always been drawn to, or what do you kind of feel like you're especially good at?
So what I was drawn to and what I do now and what I have done, sort of what my profession has become, will sound like polar opposites. My education in college was, I got a degree in psychology. I worked as a case manager, a community-based case manager, which is what they call it when you're in the home, going to court with the families, going to the school. And I was working initially with children. And then I worked in an opioid addiction treatment center for a while as a counselor. I did all of that for close to 5 years and then could not. do it anymore. It's just, it's grueling, and I was not cut out for it. It seems like people either do that their entire life, or they're just passionate about it and just can handle it, or there's a lot of turnover. And unfortunately, I was one of the people that really couldn't manage it. So after that happened, I was like, I want to sit in an office and like just regroup and figure out what I'm going to do. And so what I happened into is contracts management, which again sounds completely, maybe on paper, maybe it doesn't, but to me, I would imagine that it sounds very different than working in social services and then working in contracts management. But it has turned out to be a really good fit, because when you start looking at negotiations and things like that, there are a lot of ways you have to kind of think, what is the other person's motivation for this? Who are they hearing from that's kind of influencing what they're coming back with? So that's been kind of like the nuanced piece that I've developed over time. But what I have found within that profession that I really like doing that's even more specific is working with small businesses. So small business contractors being able to perform work for government entities. So that's this little niche that I've carved out for myself. And a lot of it has to do with advocating for small businesses, helping them understand how do you bid big work for, say, a federal contractor or whoever it might have been that I was working with. So that's kind of what I've done.
Yeah, we're always thinking about the monopolies soaking up all
Right.
the business. What is it about? I mean, is that sort of related to your thinking of helping small businesses work with government?
Yes, it is. I have this very strong sense of, I mean, all sorts of words come to mind: fairness, justice, right and wrong, but not so much from a moral or ethical standpoint. This is right and this is wrong, and I have a strong opinion about it. There is that element, but it's more, if it can be fair, I think it should be fair. There's sometimes it's not going to be fair. Life is not fair, but I think we should aim for that and try for that, and help people be able to access things that they might not necessarily be able to access with the big companies. But the piece is, and not to get too far in the weeds, but basically if you think of like a government entity that's going to purchase is very different than commercial also, because they know exactly what they want. They know what their budget is. They know they're going to buy it, which is different than commercial, right? They're going to, again, an example, this kind of random, they're going to replace the HVAC system in this elementary school. It's already been decided, right? They just need to decide who does it. And the way that government procurement works, it could be a big company, it could be a small company. It literally doesn't matter. It's just, can you do it? And so it can be fair. It can be a benefit to the smaller businesses to pursue the public sector type work. And just a lot of them don't know about that. And I'm starting a new role soon that is specifically geared toward disparity reduction in subcontracting. So I've been doing this for a while now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just had another idea for a tattoo, and if it can be fair, it should be fair. Like that. Yeah. That's a campaign slogan right there.
If it can be fair, it should be fair. Like that's a
bumper sticker.
I'm not a Pollyanna. I'm pretty cynical. I'm pretty dry, but you could try. You try to make it fair, right? So.
Well, yeah, you can't make everything fair. It's not just totally idealism, but if it can be, why not?
Yeah, it can be. And that's bitten me in the rear a few times, because sometimes it can be, but there are people who don't want it to be, there's all sorts of times where that's true. So
can I ask, when does your new role start?
I start in, should I give you, like, how specific do you want the answer to be?
A date, I mean,
if you know a date, yeah.
It's fine. Okay, yeah. It starts September 16th.
Okay.
All right. That helps because they think of that's where planets are in certain places, and that's when it can happen.
Thanks, Scott.
Audience, if you want to use that information, you need to look for transits. And now Sarah has one more chart to make, and that's going to be the one for when Amanda's new job starts or her new position starts.
Yeah.
Creating more work for you.
It's okay.
How would your friends describe you?
My friends would describe me. It depends on the friend. That's kind of a cheating answer, but let me give you two answers. Context is I don't have a lot of friends. A lot of my friends have they meet very specific needs, right? Like I have a friend that I know I can talk to about anything. This person is my best friend. And then I have another friend that likes the same kinds of movies that I like. And so, we go to the movies together, things like that. That person might not know some of the things that this friend that I have deeper conversations with. But I would say across the board, I would think people think that I'm pretty straightforward. I'm just kind of going to say it like it is. But I'm also at the same time, I'm extremely non-judgmental. So I will tell you what I see, but a lot of it will be kind of talking through how you feel about what's going on, right? So I'm a good listener. I give good advice, but I also kind of mind my own business, if that makes sense. Like I'll listen to what you're saying. I'll be happy to give you feedback on it, but you're going to have to figure it out. Like that's going to be my answer. You're going to have to figure it out on your own. I'm pretty funny usually when I'm, it just depends. But again, dry humor, just really. And I think they'd say I'm smart. I've always done well academically. I haven't really known anybody I don't have any friends necessarily nowadays that knew me when I was in school. But yeah, I'd say funny, dry.
You were one of those students that would be cheated off of and not doing the cheating?
You better never cheat off me. Like, no, I was the tattletale. Like, I was the one. Okay, I was insufferable. Front and center of the classroom, hand raised for every question. Always got the right answer. Arrogant about it. And I was on the lookout for people to tattle on. So wanted to sit with, I can remember as a kid being at recess and wanting to sit with the teachers, and they had to shoo me away. So I was that kid. Yeah.
What other types of descriptions for you growing up would you describe? Like what kind of a kid were you overall? What kind of things did you like to do?
As a kid, I really liked to read. I would have multiple books going at once. I'd have one next to my bed. I'd have one I had in my backpack. I'd have one, that I'd keep next to the kitchen table that I would read when I was in there, with somebody that was cooking dinner or whatever. I'd have 3 or 4 books I was reading at a time. I would hide under my blanket at night with a flashlight and read after I was supposed to be in bed. I was also I've always been into scary stuff, like not necessarily just horror movies, but also kind of gritty crime drama stuff, like things that are a little unnerving. And I think for me, and even as a kid, like I can remember getting a book about serial killers when I was like, it wasn't from the school library, it was from the library in my town, and I remember reading a statistic, and it was like such and such number of, murders. And in my little kid brain, I was like, that's not 0. Like I did the math. Okay, there's this many people and it's this percentage. Like I have this 1 in whatever chance of being killed by a serial killer. I was like, yeah, that's not a 0. So that's kind of how my brain worked. And I'm still a little bit that way, just looking for the shoe to fall. I'm looking for where the problem is going to be. So I like to read. I like to also, I'm really crafty, and this is still true. I knit, I crochet. A lot of this I learned as a kid. Cross stitch, sewing. draw. I've picked that back up not too long ago. I did it as a kid and kind of set it to the side. Watch TV. I was really into science fiction stuff as a kid. And again, that kind of gritty aliens and, the darker stuff. Yeah, I guess that.
Can you talk a little bit about your parents and kind of what they did and what your relationship with them was like?
Sure. So my father he had very blue collar work. He worked in construction when I was really young, and then he worked in a factory that manufactured wire, like metal, wire, for most of the time that I was growing up. He worked swing shift, so he'd work like 6 days day shift, a couple days off, 6 days evening, and then a couple days off and 6 days at night. And then he'd have I think a week off or so, but he did that for years and years. So that kind of leads to a weird, he's home and he's asleep, or it was not really the same. So I still don't have a great relationship with him. He was kind of on the periphery, very, very close to my mother. I have 2 younger sisters, so I was very close to my mother. I got there are things that I had in common with my mom that I didn't have in common with anybody else. I would feel like if I had something that I wanted advice on, if I went to my mom, she would understand how my thinking got me to where I was, whereas I have to explain it to anybody else. So my mom she didn't work when I was little. She stayed home with me and with my sisters until I was, 2 younger sisters. And so till we were all in school, and she didn't work. And then she actually opened a in-home childcare center. So my dad, doing construction, built this separate structure on off our backyard area where she could have a daycare behind the house. So she did that for very long time, and then she passed away young. So now she's not around, and like I said, there's a lot of things that only she would really understand. So that's been that's been rough. But my dad's still around, but I don't really talk to him very much.
On the survey, you did put on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as childhood experience, it was pretty low. Is there within what you're comfortable talking about? Can you kind of shed a little light on that?
Yes. So part of being insufferable is nobody likes you. So I was not, kids didn't like me, and I don't blame them. I was arrogant. And that came from the messaging that I got at home, which was that, sum it up, anything short of perfection was unacceptable. But it was so specifically around obedience. So, I graduated top of my class. School was never an issue. I didn't have to study. I was the kid that went in and, I got a 100 plus the 10-point extra credit without studying. And so that was the expectation. And I wonder sometimes what it would have been like if that hadn't been easy for me. Because it being the expectation, when you can meet it, it validates your sense of, this is something that gets me approval. And so it's the right thing. This is the best thing. But it wasn't just the academic stuff. It was, my parents were both very rigid in their expectations. I was very sheltered. They were very overprotective, but in a kind of a messed up way. So I, even though I never gave them any reason. I was a good kid. I was making straight A's. I was, but they did not trust any of us. that was just how the house operated, is you are not trustworthy. And so I'm not going to treat you as though you're trustworthy. There were times when I was dating in high school, I dated the same guy the whole time. So once I was actually, and I say dated, when you're, wasn't allowed to date at first, but once I was old enough, this was the same guy. And so we would go out. I can remember in my hometown, we were going to a movie. We stopped to have dinner first. At the time, I had to call my parents when I got to the restaurant, call them when I was leaving the restaurant, call them when I got to the movie, tell them what movie I was seeing, call them when I left the movie. So we had left the dinner. It was a few minutes drive, and we had some time. We were early. We finished dinner early. So we turned. Well, we're just going to drive around. Pull out of the restaurant parking lot, go right. The movie theater's left. We get 100 yards down the road. My parents are in the car behind us. My dad's laying on the horn, and basically pulls us over and gets me out of the car because I was lying about where I was going, and they would not hear anything else about it. That was it. You must be lying. Why would you turn this way? The movie theater's that way. So it was like that.
They were tailing you from the theater?
My dad would sit across. I worked at an ice cream shop, and my dad would sit in the parking lot across the street and watch with binoculars. He did that to me. He did that to both my sisters. And again, we gave him no reason. We gave them no reason. No reason. They were very, very, very young when I was born. I was the oldest. And they both had pretty messed up childhoods. And so I think it was just their way of coping with parenthood. I don't think either of them was well suited to parenthood at all. And so they coped with it in these really unhealthy, not great ways. Yeah. So, I mean, the same kind of thing. There was a time when I had qualified to go on this trip for school because of my grades and behavior at school. It was this like out of town trip, and planning for it. Everybody's looking forward to it. A couple days before the trip, I forgot to put the laundry from the washer into the dryer. And so I wasn't allowed to go on the trip. That was a reaction. So I go to school. I tell the teacher, who's like the chaperone, is like the lead person organizing the trip. And he's like, "Are you sure? That doesn't really make a lot of sense." And I got upset, and I told him, "Yeah, that's fine." So he called my mom, and she was like, "Yeah, that's fine. She didn't put the laundry in the dryer, so she can't go." And he was able to talk her into it. But that was kind of how it was. And so I grew up thinking that asking for help or making mistakes was a sign of weakness, I guess, or even like stupidity in a way. And it was validated because that was the only way that I got any sort of kudos for anything, was excelling. So long answer, but that probably illustrates.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then you get a little older and you can actually date on your own. What kind of person were you attracted to? And then I think you mentioned that you were married. Can you kind of describe what drew you to them?
So originally, the person that I was with in high school, we went to the same college. I followed him. I could have gone lots of places. I followed him, went where he went. And we were together for another few years in college, ended up splitting up. He had cheated on me and we split up. After that, I was really drawn to like men who would make decisions for me. And because if you wanted me to do a certain thing and I did it, then getting the validation of, yes, you're obeying, but not like these people were not, I could have gotten in some pretty bad relationships if I'd chosen the wrong guy. I think I lucked out. But the guys that I picked were just kind of jerks. They weren't, they weren't taking advantage of that. But if I did everything that he wanted me to do, then that was very validating for me, the approval. So my husband, My husband, so I went through a couple, I was like serial monogamy, right? Like I'd be in a relationship for years, 2 years, and then, that would end and it's like, boom, you're my new boyfriend like 2 days later. So my husband now wouldn't make decisions for me. And he was like, oh, I'm not going to do, whatever you need to do. And that was our relationship at first was very, very volatile because there was a lot of me pushing back and thinking that you don't care. If you don't have an opinion about this, then you must not care. So like in retrospect, I can see that. And it was a little more nuanced than just summarizing it. But he was just like, I care about you. I don't care about what you do. Like I care about, you're not. And so it's like the relationship now, we've been together a really, really long time now. But I think that's what's made the relationship strong for both of us is we don't dictate any behavior on the part of the other one, just kind of the opposite. But it was kind of the arrogant, like swagger kind of guys, brainiac kind of guys, geeky stuff.
Yeah. And any money or debt issues? Like, do you like to save up for big purchases, or is it easy come, easy go, small, when I want something, I get it kind of thing?
Well, let me put it this way. So a lot of, when you're looking at goal setting type stuff, right? They're like, you need to reward yourself for some. I have never been able to do that because if I want something, I just get it. Like I don't do delayed gratification. Like it's beyond me to be able to do it. So financially, that's not really a great way to be, but, and it has gotten us in some trouble, but luckily I've always had the income to be able to mitigate that, but I'm not a saver. And that's, I think in the last several years become more of an issue. And so I'm now kind of, it's dawning on me, hey, you probably should have done this a long time ago. But I guess easy come, what dog's about to bark. I guess easy come, easy go is probably a good description of it. Easy come, easy go, but I guess kind of paying the price of being that way and actively trying to stop being that way.
But it sounds like, now you're planning on doing some saving, like, and it hadn't been as much of an issue.
It's still an issue. It's one of the things that is a struggle for me. And I think part of it comes from messages that I got as a kid, again, about, so we did not have very much money growing up, but my mother we somehow managed we had one vacation every year, like one big vacation. We always had the money that we needed for things, for school and things like that. But I did not realize then how little money my family had growing up, because I didn't really, that's the house I lived in, right? Like I didn't know what was going on in other people's family financial situations. But I think, but they also never talked about it, never told me this is how we managed to do this, right? Like there was no discussion about personal finance or anything like that. So I think just, it looked to me like, oh, we just have the money. Like, sure, if we need some. So I think that was part of the messaging. But then also I got messaging that money, like working for something and then having to spend it on a kid was kind of like a pain in the ass. Like I got that messaging. It's like, I don't really want to have to do this. My dad was he's still very, he doesn't like to spend money, but I can remember we were shopping for school clothes and I wanted a hoodie and I wanted one with a zip. No, he was dead serious. Let's just get one that pulls over your head and we can just cut it up the middle because it costs less. So this is kind of the messaging I got. And so I think when I got older and I had money to be able to just whatever, it was just like, I guess it's like I didn't really, I didn't really know any other way. And spending money on myself felt like a luxury because I had always felt like it was something nobody else really thought was worth doing.
Mm-hmm. So at least if you're spending it, you're enjoying it.
Right. If I'm spending it, I'm enjoying it. And what's the worst that could happen? Right. Like I kind of have that. What's the worst that could happen? There's some things that could happen. And I've kind of been through those things and I still didn't learn
Worth it.
Yeah.
On the subject of health and self-care, are there any like issues that have been especially front and center as far as things you've had to overcome or deal with mostly, and how have you worked through those?
So I am deaf, small d deaf. I wear hearing aids in both ears. I have been wearing hearing aids since I was a young adult. And I have a sister who wore them from childhood. So it's some sort of genetically predisposed thing. And so that's something that it's not going anywhere, and it's the type of hearing loss that I have is not something that they can treat. It has to do with nerve damage and like dying auditory nerves. So they can't do anything with that. It's not like a cochlear implant or any sort of surgery. So I don't even realize how big a deal it is until I'm alone in a unique, like unfamiliar place. Like if I have to travel on my own, then I notice that it's a lot more difficult because I'm not hearing people and I don't realize I'm not hearing people. And I do read lips. So, but my husband he's able, if we're at a restaurant and the server says something and I didn't quite hear it, he will know that and repeat it. So when he's not around, I notice it more. And that can be really frustrating because it can sometimes feel like embarrassment because I think people come across, they think that you are ignoring them or maybe somebody thinks you're not understanding because you're not, paying attention. So that can be frustrating, especially for somebody like me where I'm very worried about getting it right and getting things right and being understood. And that's, I guess, probably the lifelong thing that I've had to deal with. But I do have some mental health struggles that I've had, and that's kind of been a lifelong thing too. They were way worse. I'm going to say it an age older. They were worse years ago than they are now. And actually, I'd say now it's just well managed. Everything's, but that was a big time struggle in the past.
Is there, using years, kind of a general area where you would say it was at its worst? I'm guessing what the astrologers would want to know is kind of time period of where that would have been bad and it's good now, but not age, obviously, stay out of age.
So are you talking about like how many years ago or like?
Yeah, you could say like, 10 years ago it was bad, or you could say in 2012 it was at its peak, or, just a general.
I would say it was the period from I'd say 2002 until about 2005 was the worst, but it wasn't until probably another 10 years after that it was manageable.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And what helped you get through that? Was there anything in particular that was especially helpful to work through it?
I am very good at telling people how I'm feeling. I'm very introspective about it. And I mean very specific. My therapist I have now said that most people, when they come into therapy, it's like they know sad, mad, glad. And that's about as nuanced as it is for most people. And I've just always been able to very clearly communicate how I'm feeling, what I feel like I need. And I'm a very strong advocate for myself. I really think that is that's been the main thing, because navigating mental health care systems, it's hard. And understanding, also probably in part understanding more about how they worked because of sorry about that. My husband will get him in a second. Understanding more, just one second.
A proud dog owner for the audience at home, if that factors into your decision.
Got it under control. There are two of them in there, but so being able to advocate, also just having an understanding of it because of the work that I've done, the educational background that I have. So being able to advocate, being able to understand it, and being able to speak very clearly about what I was experiencing. And even though I'm kind of anti-confrontation, if I feel like I'm in the wrong, I don't want somebody calling me out on something. I'd rather just kind of like avoid that conversation. But I don't mind being assertive if it's, again, tied to that. If it can be fair, it should be fair. If something can benefit someone, and then it should be done. And I think some of that has played into almost demanding things for myself that I needed from providers and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And medication and therapy, and just not having, I've never felt a stigma about it for myself. I've felt frustrated that people don't understand it, but I've never felt like it was anything I needed to be ashamed of or anything like that. It was probably the opposite. I felt like I could talk about it just like I could talk about my hearing. Like, it's just a thing. It's a thing I'm working through. It's a thing that, I got dealt. And I've always had a really good support system. I've not had to do it on my own. I've had people just at different junctures. It might have been different people who could step in and help me if I got to a point where I couldn't do things for myself, and kind of do the things that make sure that you have a place to stay and food to eat and things like that. I've been really lucky that when I wasn't able to take care of myself to the point for those things, then I had people who could. So
that's just like going back to your days as a caseworker, is trying to look out for people who need to take care of the basic necessities.
Yeah. And I think I have this, I tend to overhelp sometimes, but I'm very cynical at the same time. I will overhelp people who are like suffering. There's a difference between the way it feels to me. There's a difference between somebody who is going through something rough and somebody who is suffering, who is like emotionally suffering through something. And if I see that in somebody else, it is so hard for me to dial back the jumping in and helping with that. And that's been to my detriment sometimes too. Just overextending myself, and sometimes financially, for people like that. So,
One that I skipped over that we like to know about is how you deal with difficult emotions. So if you are going whether it's related to that or something smaller, how do you usually process that?
I'm in therapy. I also am, and this is something I've had to develop over the years, knowing when I need to kind of just step away and be by myself. I get very overstimulated. If I'm having a rough time, I stay at like a 7 of like, just, I'm doing my hand like back and forth, because it's like this sort of frantic, all this commotion is kind of happening in my head when I get overwhelmed. So if I'm in a place where there are people around and things like that, I need time to get away from that. So I think giving myself permission, and I was talking about, I need to make myself available to the person that I'm with, because I need to make sure I'm doing everything they want done. And so that kind of went hand in hand for a while, because when I was struggling, it was like the person I was with was still who I was putting ahead of myself. So kind of getting to the point where I can say, you know what, I need to just don't talk to me. Like I'm depleted. I need to go back by myself and do a thing that I enjoy doing. Most of the things I do that kind of recharge me are solitary activities. I do illustration. I do, the things I mentioned, knitting, crochet, sewing. I like to watch movies. I like to listen to podcasts. My husband and I don't really have a lot of overlap in the things that we like in terms of genre and things like that. So I usually am watching stuff on my own, on my iPad. I do what
kind of things are those? Because we do like to get media recommendations. Is there something like a couple things that you really like that you would recommend and that you especially enjoy watching or reading?
I don't read. That's the other thing. I don't read nearly as much. Like when I was a kid, read just all the time. I don't really read anymore. Kind of gotten away from that, and I regret that. And I try, and it's just like I just don't have the concentration for it anymore. But I watch a lot of. I think of what I've watched lately. That's good. I watch a lot of limited series lately. So not so much a TV show or maybe just kind of an in-between. There are a couple things I think they're on Max that I've watched recently. One is called Love and Death. It's a mini-series about this murder that happened in the 80s, and it was in Texas. So that's kind of what I've been watching. And what you're witnessing is it's hard for me to remember. I have trouble remembering what I watched. I watched Presumed Innocent, which is Jake Gyllenhaal thing that's on now. It's a little limited series based on a novel. So the things that I tend to like, I really, really enjoy things with a twist, like a plot twist, or things that have this like red herring where you think this is what's going to happen, and then actually it's this thing that's been in the background the whole time is what was important, or lots of kind of twisty.
The biggest M. Night Shyamalan fan ever.
Yes, actually, yes. Yeah. That sort of thing. And also like movies that don't have a nice little bow at the end. I know my sister hates it. She wants everything squared away at the end. I like it when it's more open. I like it when it's just like this happened and then here's the end of it, but these people are still like out there doing something. It's just kind of like a vignette, like cut out a little piece. So
when they do that, when the credits come up and I'm like, wait a minute, that was the ending? I don't know. It seemed like it just like they ran out of film or something.
I like it when the end surprises me like that. I was like, oh, okay, well, that was it. Where it's not kind of signaling to you based on the music. We're almost at the end or whatever. But I do like scary stuff. I like stuff that's kind of nerve wracking. And I think I read it actually when I graduated college. I got an honors diploma. And to get my honors diploma, I had to do a senior thesis. And my senior thesis was on, it was a critique of horror cinema. Well, no, it was a critique of critiques of horror cinema, specifically from like a feminist perspective. So violence against women, being central themes and things like that. And I was a gender studies minor. So, but at the same time, I love these horror movies. And so I did my senior project around how actually these movies they teach us what to be afraid of. So it's important if you look at what was popular in the 70s versus 80s versus 90s versus if you go back to the 50s, you've got creature horror, right? So different things will teach us about ourselves and what we're supposed to be afraid of. So I think I watch things with that sort of critical eye, and depending on how things are going in my life, I watch more or less of certain types of genres. But always scary stuff. Always love the scary stuff.
And last question for me before I turn it over to the astrologers, if they have any follow-ups that they want to do. Just the last 12 months, if there's sort of like a theme of an area of your life that you feel like the last 12 months has been focused on, anything during that time period that's been especially eventful for you?
The last 12 months have been like, if you just take a snow globe and just shake it, that's how everything has been for me for the last 12 months. We've moved 1,000 miles. I've had a layoff. My husband had he was raised by his grandparents. His grandfather passed away. His grandmother has had to go into assisted living. We also had some things going on with other family members that were especially emotionally taxing. It's just been a lot. There's been a lot going on. And so it's been challenging from that perspective. Also, my husband broke his arm, and he broke like this bone, this humerus, right in half, just snapped it in half. So it was a really long time before he was able to do a lot. He had to have surgery. And so just even doing a lot of this, I was the one I had two arms. I was anything that required two arms I had to do. It's just been rough. And it still is to a degree.
Okay.
Being in a new place, we've been here a couple months now, and it's great. We're really happy here, but because of kind of the turmoil that's been going on, or it's all the people around me, right? It's like I've been okay, but it's just I'm the center of all this stuff happening, and it's still not all the way settled, but it's like that snow globe's kind of starting to settle down.
That seems like makes me think of the eye of a tornado too. You
Yes.
seem fine, but everything around you is swirling around.
Yes. And then because of the kind of person that I am, it is really hard for me, one, to step back and be like, I need time to myself, right? Like I have to make myself do that because I see things that are hard. Like if I see something that's hard for my husband, my inclination is to do it for him. Not like, I'm not talking about household stuff. I'm talking about, he's caring for elderly grandparents. That's really hard, very hard. So I try to shield him from that, and I end up doing too much and wearing myself out. So even though it's not my issue, just exclusively my issue, I still kind of can take on too much because of it.
And it culminates with a podcast appearance.
It does. It's good. I've been looking forward to it, really.
So have we. Astrologers, anything you wanted to follow up on? Get some more details on something?
Well, first of all, thank you for providing so much detail. That was very helpful. I do have just a couple of quick questions, and then Melissa, if you have any, you can feel free to chime in. So you were saying that you like, like things with plot twists and red herrings and stuff. So are you like kind of a detective type person?
Oh gosh. Yes, I've actually considered at one point trying to become a private investigator because I just really love digging into things and just seeing how far I can go. Part of that is because of, so the career that I'm in now in contracts, a lot of it has to do with what does the law say about things, right? And so especially when you're dealing with government contracts, a lot of that is doing a lot of research on what have the decisions in the past been when this sort of thing comes up. So I enjoy that part of it work-wise, but I also just have this endless curiosity. And one question leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And so I can get really, and I'm good at finding things. For example, there is a YouTuber. I watch a lot of YouTube, educational kind of stuff usually. But there's a YouTuber that I used to watch. All I knew was her first name, and very, very common first name. She didn't share her last name. She didn't share where she lived or anything like that. And her content wasn't related to any of that. So I knew her first name. Obviously, I knew what she looked like. She mentioned moving to a specific city. That was all I had. And I was able to find, just from Google, like I'm not talking about databases that maybe law enforcement have access to. I was able to find out like where she worked and where she moved and things like that. And I wouldn't do anything with that information. It's just that curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just good at fact finding.
You got to meet up with our previous guest, Tina, runs a true crime podcast. And Tina, if you need any extra research help,
You know what?
I feel like Amanda's the one to call.
That's something I have been looking into, is doing research for podcasts, doing like fact checking. Yes, give Tina my information. That sounds wonderful. Yeah.
Making connections.
And then just, I have a couple of health questions, and you can just answer yes or no. You can also answer no comment if you don't want to touch on that, if it's too personal. But have you ever had any issues with your kidneys?
Not that I've, no.
How about lower back?
Sometimes lower back pain.
Okay. How about your iron? Do you have low iron?
Not that I've ever known, no.
Okay.
I've had it checked, but it's never come up.
Okay. Do you have a nervous stomach or anything like that?
No, I do not actually. It's
okay.
I don't have any really stomach issues. Yeah.
Have you ever had any issues around acne?
When I was like a young adult.
Okay.
Not so much before that or after that, but.
Dehydration, is that an issue?
No.
Okay. And then, have you ever had any issues around like indigestion or IBS or anything like that?
No, I had one bout of course, having a lot of heartburn, and it was just like this one thing that was going on for a few months, and then I don't really have a lot of GI issues.
Okay. And, are you ever accused of being moody or anything like that?
Oh my gosh, yes. Every day, all day, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Well, by people that know me personally, yes. At work, no.
Okay. Yeah. And Melissa, if you have any additional questions.
Do you see dead people? No. But as much as you love
No spoilers on this podcast.
I know. Yeah, like as far as your intuition goes, and you don't have to dive into your spirituality if you don't want to, but as far as your like just your intuition goes, or like if you even want to like put yourself on a psychic scale, where would you put yourself? Like where you just know things, or have a really strong.
I do feel like I wouldn't say that psychic scale, not really. Like I don't think I'd ever word it that way, but I do believe in synchronicity to a strong degree, and I do find that when I tend to focus on something with that in mind, I will see connections and like really like specific coincidences, but it's not something that happens all the time. It seems to happen. My mother and my sisters have also commented on this for themselves, but it seems to happen when I'm trying to make a decision, or there's like a time when I'm not really sure what to do. I will start to see a lot of those like weird coincidences cropping up. So, but I don't feel like I'm able to, I don't have any ability to know what's going to happen next or anything like that. But I do feel like I can read a person's emotions pretty well too. Like I can walk into a room and kind of tell what the temperature of the conversation was before I came in and things like that.
Read the room well. Do you have any significant relationship with dreams? And what I mean by that is like, do you have like crazy dreams where you're like, oh my God, or possibly even nightmares, like more on the nightmare side, and I'll follow it up with like any sleep issues.
So all of the above, yes. I had a big interest in dreaming as a young person, and actually sort of taught myself to lucid dream. I looked at how do you lucid dream, different methods that people use. And so I can still do that. And I think I have nightmares more often than most people do. And I don't dream about like monsters chasing me, and it's more situations where I feel I feel very out of control, or it's usually the nightmare is about how it made me feel. Like I remember feeling this way in the dream, and it was awful to feel that way, and I couldn't get away from it. So I have a lot of dreams like that, and I also have certain dreamscapes that I will dream the same place over and over again and have for as long as I can remember. There are a few different ones. So that freaks me out a little bit when I have those dreams, because they feel so significant and it's so specific, and it's like, how is this even a thing? So I've always, kind of been fascinated by all that.
Do you ever have bouts of insomnia at all?
Oh, not so much anymore, but for years, yes, I had terrible, terrible insomnia, like hours to fall asleep. That was, for years. And now sometimes I don't really have trouble falling asleep, but I'll maybe have a few weeks where I sleep like 4 hours and I just wake up and just get up, and my body will know that I'm kind of sleep deprived, but mentally I still feel mostly okay. And that again tends to happen, I think, when there's a lot of stuff going on. My mind just kind of continues to work on it. But yes, insomnia, but not lately, even with everything going on.
Last question.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned earlier about the, like when you would read books as when you were younger, like with serial killer, and even though it was like, probably 1 in a million chance of dying, you're like, well, that's not enough. Like I need it to be 0. So do you feel like, do you have a relationship with like we all do, don't get me wrong, but like, do you tend to focus a lot on the fear of loss, of losing things, losing people? Is that something that feels maybe more heightened for you?
Yeah, it is. I'd say that's more heightened. It's just because of I guess that is a good way to put it, is the fear of loss. Because it comes from, it's weird that this is where my brain went, but it's like that pain aversion with the tattoos. It's like the emotional pain too. Like I'm avoiding pain, like of any kind. And so just knowing how devastating certain losses would be, it just triggers like this panic in me, because you can't always avoid loss. But yeah, I'd say so.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I had one more I meant to ask. We had a question that says, how much stamina do you have for physically demanding activities such as exercise or physical labor? And you kind of rated that 2 out of 10. So are you the type of person, like, do you find yourself more lacking energy, or do you have an abundance of energy that you need to burn up every day?
I run out of energy at some point during the day, every day. It just depends on what I'm doing that day. But yeah, I wouldn't say I have an abundance of energy at all. And I think part of it stems from the things that I like to do. Like I said, they're solitary and you're sitting down. So I just have not ever been kind of a get up and go person. And my family wasn't. So I just don't really there have been periods of time in my life when I was a lot more active, but right now not so much.
Okay. Are you the type of person to kind of like zone out and get lost in your imagination?
I don't usually get lost in my imagination. Like daydreaming, not so much.
Okay.
I will get lost in like a pursuit, or just kind of digging deep into some sort of Wikipedia rabbit hole or something like that. And so my mind will latch onto that even when I'm doing something else, but it's not so much, I don't imagine myself doing certain things or dream about vacations or anything like that.
Okay. All right.
Right. Well, they've got the info they need. And thank you for sharing as much as you did. We're going to put you in the waiting room for just a little bit. They're going to take a few minutes to compare notes. and then we'll bring you back in and we'll see if the chart that they picked is correct.
Okay.
All right. So you got a few minutes to yourself.
All right. Thanks.
Let me find a way to do this. But they keep moving the buttons around. Okay, now I'm sending you to the waiting room. Okay. All right, Astro Detectives. We've had our testimony. We've interrogated our suspect. Now I was doing the math on that. I think astrology is the suspect, and we're the detectives who are investigating about the astrology. That makes me a detective too, and I like to be a part of the group. But it's like good cop, bad cop. Like Sarah's the good cop talking to astrology, like, "Hey, astrology, look, I just want to know where you were, and let's make this work out for you." And then I'm over there like, "Astrology, I don't think you're real. Give it up." All that being said, you guys, are you leaning towards one chart or the other chart? And discuss.
Yeah. How are you feeling, Melissa?
I mean, there are definitely things I could pick from both charts. Don't get me wrong. Honestly, she got on screen and I was like, oh, shoot, she looks like a Cancer rising to me. So I was like, oh, but I have to say that, like, I am going to lean towards the Leo sun, Libra rising, the Pisces moon, because the grand trine in water. So a few things. So the moon, so in that chart, in her Pisces moon is opposing her Saturn. And that is that's a very difficult placement and can bring a lot of loneliness, which she talks about in her childhood. It can bring a lot of loneliness. She has moon in the 6th house. That speaks to the mother, that strictness. And then with the opposing Saturn, the mother, father, like there's some mental health issues, possibly, and the strictness and not trusting her. That also speaks to, and this is where my line of questioning was, because she has Chiron in the 8th house in Taurus. And I literally, before the show, put fear of loss and issues with trust. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
And the whole 8th house, like the serial, like in a lot of ways, like that sort of really into true crime and all that stuff, actually, in a lot of ways, subconsciously is processing a lot of like the darker psychological stuff underneath. And even Saturn in the 12th house for the father figure, like neglect. I mean, obviously he was paying attention at certain points, like when she'd go on dates, but then he was also working 6-hour, date, 6 days a week or whatever. So the insomnia. Oh, that's the other thing. When you have moon opposing Saturn, that a lot of times can bring on insomnia and nightmares. And so, and needing a lot of solitude, which she alluded to. I think the whole not wanting to feel pain, that's very much a water sign thing, which could be a Cancer rising thing too. But the kind of like doing everything you can to not have pain, right? Yeah. And I mean, her tattoos were so Pisces. So I was,
I'm leaning the same way as you are. Although I did have that same reaction when I saw her. I was like, oh, she kind of looks maybe Cancer rising to me, which does make me nervous because a lot of times my initial instinct about the rising usually is correct, but I don't know.
But
in this case,
did she go on about the Libra rising, like the whole
exactly, yeah. There was fairness and equality were like such big themes. There was some
doing
other
contracts.
And she said, when she's talking about media recommendations, she said love and death, which is like Pluto in Libra rising, like to me, or Mars, Mars is there too. Presumed innocent, things with a twist. Really and having that Pluto in the first house is definitely someone who maybe had a lot of like control placed on them in their childhood,
Yes.
but also interest in serial killers and crime. And then that can really influence you as a person wanting to be that detective and going down rabbit holes and things like that. Now, our Aries chart, I mean, that has like the Pluto there is just like has opposite the sun.
Yeah, I know.
And kind of square the ascendant. I don't know if that's enough though. Like, and I'm really thinking that someone with that fire trine there would be so much more energetic. Um, and yeah, there's just, what else was I going to say? So she was talking about the deafness and the nerve damage, and so I was trying to like find that. I think Mercury has to do with ears and hearing, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And so the Leo chart does have Mercury square to Mars.
Yeah.
And it is the ruler of her chart ruler, that Mercury in Cancer. The things that I was a little led astray by, I guess, was, the Mars and Pluto in the first house. I kind of would expected maybe some more issues around digestion issues, maybe the iron issues. I'm not sure. I mean, that is something that I tend to see there. But then when she said, I'm like, are you moody? And she's like, oh yes. Now I guess that could be Mars in the first house too, but that's often like a Cancer rising thing.
Well, I also, yes, Mars is in its detriment in Libra, but it's also a very strategizing energy, which is exactly what she's having to do working for these small businesses.
Yeah.
She's literally strategizing and like using it in a way that feels fulfilling. So I'm wondering if prior to this, that Mars on the ascendant probably would have been a little bit more of an issue. I mean, that's what I see in charts is like we can have these hard transit or hard placements, but once you start using them in a way that actually feels fulfilling, like kind of taking your wounds, right? Like that Chiron, the wounds that make you wise, and starting to like put it out into the world and help others because you've had to do the work personally yourself. And now you can kind of bring it into your career or your passion. I do feel like it tends to kind of like filter out a little bit more, like it kind of mitigates the risk of what that placement can be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So but I know what you're saying. I mean, I do think the Pluto in the first house really speaks to what happened with her parents, because Pluto in the first house is like in this lifetime, you are making major transformations and major growth and evolution around your personal power. And I feel like, obviously we only got a little blip of her childhood.
Yeah.
But there's obviously a lot more there to unpack, but I do feel like that was like a really big expression.
Let me ask you something. Is there one question when she comes back on that we could ask her that would really maybe tip us off if she is an Aries, the Aries chart?
It's a great question. I will say the whole good student thing in the Aries chart, she has Saturn in the third house in Virgo. And that tends to be a very disciplined person. You know what I mean? When it comes to education. And then also she's getting a new job and Mars is about to hit her midheaven, and that's in the Leo chart.
Well, she did say, oh yeah. And so, she talked about, because she's a Leo, I'm sorry, with the Libra rising chart, which is our Leo. I was expecting, if that's the chart, to hear a ton of people and change in her life hitting all sectors. And that's what she said, because the eclipses are hitting Libra risings right now, or they have been for the last year. And
right.
that's kind of what she described. And the job that she's going to be getting is going to be right on the eclipse that will be hitting her sixth house of work, and her moon's there. So I don't know. I'm feeling, I'm feeling Leo as well. And a lot of things she's seeking validation. She said that quite a bit, which is such a more of a Leo than an Aries thing.
Agreed.
So I think we just have to vote the way we think,
Yeah.
But
I know I'm trying to think of like a good question, but I mean, obviously it's 50-50. And I'm trying to keep my ego in the back seat and stay humble. But I do feel pretty good about this Leo Sun Libra rising.
And I feel like a Sag moon is definitely a wanderer, someone likes to,
I know. I was going to ask her if she was like, because generally Sag moons, they tend to be pretty rebellious in their early like adolescence. And they do have the dry humor, which she said she has that dry humor, but I did not. And the moon is in the fifth house, which that's a cool. I mean, any placements in the fifth house is pretty nice, right? And
that gives in Placidus.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I do Placidus. So in the Placidus, moon is in the fifth house, and that is definitely lighter than the moon in the sixth house, right?
Sure.
And then she did work with children at one point, which I had written down. Like I knew she did not have biological children, and not every moon in the fifth house wants children, but that does tend to be something that they tend to go for, or at least they want to work with them. But that was not her passion. So
versus the Leo chart has the South Node in the whole sign fifth house. So that can be like a tendency to not want children. So, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I might just ask her, what if she has any words of wisdom or philosophy that she wants to share.
That would, definitely. We ask, like a quote that feels like really inspirational to her.
Okay. Yeah.
I will say this, even I listened to her music on her that she put, and I was like, this feels very Pisces. I don't know. The other day. So I would love to, if she has like a favorite quote. Okay.
So the quote could change your minds. I always say, like, if we're going to ask her another question, it's a question that could change your mind.
We'll have to see. I don't know. I think secretly we just want validation.
I always wonder, though, if the question goes the way you don't want it to go, or that you're not leaning, are you willing to change? Versus then why ask the question at all? But for words of wisdom, those are great. And maybe she'll recite that Charles Bukowski poem for us, because I was kind of curious what that was going to be like. So let's bring her back in, and we'll see right after this break. Welcome back, everybody. We're here. Amanda's back with us, and our astrologers just had one more question to either solidify their decisions or throw everything into chaos. So what is it?
Yeah, Amanda, do you have like an inspirational quote or something that you really like, or some sort of philosophy?
Yes. I'm trying to think how to... I have a lot of concepts that kind of are mantras and things that kind of drive how I do things, but probably one of the things, like what I was saying earlier, if it can be fair, then you should try to make it fair, but also just it'll be okay, but not today. Like, it'll be okay, but not today, and it's okay. Well, this ties it to it too. Do your best, but like today's best isn't going to be the same as tomorrow's best, right? Like when you say you're doing your best, sometimes that means you managed to get off the bed to go to the bathroom. That might be your best, and that's okay. So just kind of giving yourself permission to fluctuate. I think that's something that it took me a long time to realize. You can't hold yourself to the same standard every day, because not every day is the same.
I've heard have the best day that's available to you.
Yeah. And also, I think everybody, as far as like a philosophy, I think everybody really is just trying to do the best they can. And sometimes somebody's best is not great. And that could be for lots of reasons, because sometimes your best isn't great. And so I guess assume good intent. That's probably it. Assume good intent. Assume that if that person could do better, they probably would. So they just can't. They can't do good today for whatever reason. That may prove to not be true, but it's where I'm going to lead with. I'm going to lead with assuming good intent.
I'm going to slip one more in, and you can give a short answer.
Yep.
Did you grow up with religion?
No.
Or your parents like agnostic or atheist or?
My mother was Christian. My father was agnostic, and it never came up. We just didn't talk about it. When I stayed with my grandparents, I went to church with them. That was just a handful of times. And then when I was older in school and like I had a job and things like that, I started going to church with some friends that I was working with. And that was just more of a belonging thing for me. But as an adult, I've not ever really been religious either. So.
Okay.
Yeah, It's weird. Like, it just never came up. I didn't know until I was an adult what they believed, because it just didn't come up.
It's that point in the show where everybody's pulses go up. The astrologers decide which of these two birth charts do they think belongs to our guest. Are you guys switching from what you were leaning towards, or are you sticking with what you got?
I think sticking.
I'm going to stick.
I can just make a better case for the one than the other. So,
All right, there we go.
See. Okay,
you're making the best guess that's available to you today.
Yes. Okay. All right, Amanda. Just so you know, we had a choice between an Aries and a Leo.
Okay.
Amanda, are you a Leo?
Yes.
Yes.
The pure joy.
Sarah. Yeah.
Woohoo! High five.
I'm married to an Aries. So,
Oh, look at that.
Hey, and it fits perfectly with your chart. You have an Aries descendant.
I know. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, Amanda, are you able to stay afterwards for our bonus episode we do, where we kind of chat about it and they do a little recap, re-examination?
I'd love to do that.
Sure. All right. In the meantime, is there any place that you would want to send our audience, whether you're promoting something or a cause that you find important, or even just some recommendations for something to check out?
You know what? I have a lot of things because the move and like my life is so different than it was a few months ago in so many ways. There are a lot of things that I've wanted to do that I think I'm going to be able to gear up before too much longer. So I can share those with you once they're in play and let you know, like, I don't know, I can email them to you, but there will be, I do illustration. I'm really kind of focusing on that right now. So there will be a spot for that.
Illustration? You're doing
art? I do illustration, like digital illustration, but it's kind of focused on, so for example, like landscapes that are like dystopian, but paired with sort of animals and things like that. It's this very specific sort of drawing. I've been doing drawing for a long time, but I'd like to start putting that out there.
Okay.
And series of drawings that I'm working on. Mm-hmm.
And no account yet? You're going to make an account?
No account yet.
All right.
Because
we'll
I
add
don't
it.
do media. I don't do social media. So that's, or otherwise I'd just say, head on over to Instagram.
All right. Well, this will be coming out on Tuesday, so we'll add it to the show notes whenever you do send it in.
I will set up an account before Tuesday.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
That for you by Tuesday. It may be not a whole lot there yet, but yeah, sure. Good.
Or Monday, actually.
Keep the deadline. I work well with the deadline. So.
All right.
And Melissa, if you could let listeners know where they could reach you.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, Melissa Kelly, Melissa Kelly. And my name is spelled a little differently than the typical Melissa. It has an E on the end. I also have a website, melissajkelly.com. But you can book through my Instagram link as well.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Everybody, that's it. Let us know what you thought by commenting on whatever platform you follow us on. The links to our accounts are in the show notes. The links to Amanda's account will soon be in the show notes if it's not there yet. If you like the show and want to support it, you can visit patreon.com/AstroDetectives. There's following us for free. There's a $1 option. There's a $3 option. Or you know what? You can just enter your bank account and we'll take whatever we need. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss the next episode. Rate and review and tell your friends. And until next time, this case is closed.